do find the said defendant as to the charge of count 1, murder in the first degree, guilty of murder in the first degree.
November 15th, 2017. Lincoln, Nebraska. Sydney Loofe stands before her bathroom mirror, applying the finishing touches to her makeup. At 24 years old, she's fighting demons most people can't see. Anxiety, depression that sometimes feels like drowning. But tonight, she's hopeful. She snaps a selfie, her smile genuine if slightly nervous, and posts it to Snapchat with a caption that will haunt everyone who loves her. Ready for my date. She has no idea she's documenting the last moments of her life. Sydney grew up in small-town Nebraska, the kind of girl who could catch a fish better than most boys, and who played basketball until scoliosis stole that joy from her. After graduating from Neligh Oakdale High School in 2011, she settled into a quiet life working as a cashier at Menards in Lincoln. She lived alone with her cat, hours away from her parents in Neligh, trying to build something resembling independence while wrestling with mental health struggles that had recently worsened. Just days before, she'd sat with her family discussing her deteriorating state, and they'd driven her to a doctor's appointment to get antidepressants. It was the last time her mother, Susie, would see her daughter alive. Now Sydney is trying something new to combat the loneliness. She's downloaded Tinder, swiping through profiles, looking for connection in a digital world that promises everything and guarantees nothing. The profile that catches her eye belongs to a woman named Audrey. Young, attractive, with an easy smile and flirtatious messages. What Sydney doesn't know is that behind that profile lurks something far darker than a simple catfish. The woman is actually Bailey Boswell, 23 years old, with a troubled past written in scars both visible and hidden. Bailey's father was murdered when she was an infant. She excelled at athletics in high school, fastest on her relay team, a basketball star. But somewhere along the way, darkness crept in. She was beaten badly by an ex-boyfriend, her face kicked while pregnant, and she spiraled into a world where desperation made monsters look like saviors. And that's exactly what 51-year-old Aubrey Trail appeared to be when Bailey found him on Backpage, a now-defunct website where sex and money intersected in shadowy transactions. Trail's own childhood was a catalog of horrors, abused by his parents at age 2, passed between foster homes and juvenile facilities, landing in prison at 17 for armed robbery. He'd spent decades perfecting the art of manipulation, building what he called his lifestyle, a criminal operation that mixed antique theft, fraud, and increasingly dark sexual fantasies. By 2017, Trail had crafted an elaborate fiction that he was a vampire leading a coven of 12 witches, with Bailey as his queen witch. He told young women he could fly, read minds, and that they could gain magical powers by doing the unthinkable, by taking someone's last breath. Sydney agrees to a first date with Audrey on November 14th. They meet, and to Sydney's relief, it goes well. Bailey is charming, attentive, everything Sydney hoped for. They smoke marijuana together in Bailey's car, drive around Lincoln talking, laughing. Sydney feels the loneliness recede, just a little. She doesn't see the calculation behind Bailey's smile, doesn't know that back in a basement apartment in Wilbur, a tiny town 40 miles south of Lincoln, Aubrey Trail is waiting, preparing. She doesn't know that just hours earlier, Trail and Bailey had walked through a Home Depot in Lincoln, their faces captured on surveillance cameras as they purchased a 12-inch hacksaw, 2 gallons of Clorox bleach, a folding tree saw, 30-gallon plastic trash bags, and a razor-sharp utility knife. Sydney is still alive when they buy these tools. Still laughing, still hopeful, still believing in the possibility of wonderful someday. The very words tattooed on her arm. Bailey suggests a second date for the next evening, November 15th. Sydney says yes immediately. She's excited, genuinely happy in a way she hasn't been in months. That evening, she posts her selfie to Snapchat and heads out to meet Bailey. Cell tower data will later show both Bailey's and Trail's phones traveling from Sydney's rental home back to Wilbur. Sydney's phone pings one final time in Wilbur at 8:32 p.m., then goes dark forever. What happens in that basement apartment is brutality disguised as seduction. Trail later claims Sydney freaked out when confronted with their lifestyle, the crime ring, the stolen antiques, the twisted sexual dynamics. He says he strangled her with an extension cord because he feared she would expose them. But the evidence tells a different story, one of premeditation and cold calculation. Because here's what investigators will discover. Trail and Bailey had been building toward this for months. They'd met young women on Tinder before: Ashley Hills, Anastasia Golyakova, Anna, Katie Brandel. Trail called them his girls, paid for their nails and lingerie, gave them weekly allowances. Then came the gradual normalization of horror. Trail told them he was a vampire. Bailey claimed to be a witch who could heal people. They spoke casually about torture, about killing, about how you had to breathe in someone's last breath to gain power. They wanted to kill. They were searching for the perfect victim. Sydney Loofe fit their criteria precisely. She lived alone. She was hours away from family. She struggled with mental health issues that isolated her further. She was lonely enough to meet strangers from the internet, trusting enough to go back for a second date. Judge Vicki Johnson would later state that Trail chose Sydney based on these exact characteristics, believing no one would immediately miss her. The murder itself is an act of sustained violence. Trail strangles Sydney with an extension cord, while Bailey participates. The exact nature of her involvement becomes a matter of legal debate, but the evidence is damning. Surveillance footage from various stores shows Bailey shopping for cleaning supplies and disposal materials. Cell phone records place both of them at the scene. DNA evidence puts Bailey's genetic material on a latex glove found with Sydney's remains, smeared with blood. And then comes the desecration. Over the next 24 hours, Trail and Bailey transform that basement apartment into an abattoir. The landlord, who lives upstairs, reports an overwhelming smell of bleach emanating from the basement. Portions of the walls have been wiped down frantically in an attempt to erase evidence. Trail and Bailey cut Sydney's body into 14 pieces. Prosecutors later point to knife marks around Sydney's tattoo that have nothing to do with dismemberment, gratuitous cuts, mutilation for its own sake. Trail will later brag about drinking Sydney's blood. He jokes about the murder in conversations with his other girls. He derives intellectual and sexual gratification from what he's done, relishing every detail. On November 16th, while Sydney's family begins to panic because she hasn't shown up for work at Menards, Bailey Boswell is driving 200 miles through rural Clay County, her phone pinging from one isolated dirt road to another. She's dumping 30-gallon black trash bags containing Sydney's remains. Each bag holds pieces of a young woman who just wanted connection, who believed in the possibility of love, who thought she was meeting someone who understood her loneliness. The bags are tossed in ditches along gravel roads near Edgar, Nebraska, a town of fewer than 500 people. Some bags contain body parts. Others hold sex toys, clothing, evidence of the life Sydney will never finish living. Sydney's left upper arm is never recovered. Neither are her internal organs. It's as if Trail and Bailey wanted to ensure Sydney could never be whole again, not even in death. Meanwhile, back in Lincoln, Sydney's mother Susie sends text messages that go unanswered. When Sydney doesn't appear for her shift at Menards, alarm bells sound immediately. This isn't like Sydney. Friends and family contact police, and on November 17th, officers conduct a welfare check at Sydney's rental home. There's no sign of struggle, no indication of violence. Sydney's car sits in the driveway. Her glasses and purse remain inside. Her cat hasn't been fed. The apartment feels frozen in time, waiting for someone who will never return. Investigators dig into Sydney's digital footprint and discover the Snapchat selfie, the Tinder conversations with Audrey. They trace the phone number to Bailey Boswell and an address in Wilbur. When they arrive at the basement apartment, the smell of bleach is overwhelming. But Bailey and Trail are gone. Before disappearing, they make a calculated public relations move, a Facebook Live video where they proclaim their innocence with Oscar-worthy conviction. Bailey, tears in her eyes, explains that she and Sydney smoked marijuana together, that she dropped Sydney off at a friend's house afterward, that they'd planned to go to a casino that weekend, but Sydney never responded to her messages. Trail sits beside her, his voice dripping with concern as he prays aloud for Sydney to be found safe. It's a masterclass in manipulation, and it buys them time. They flee to Branson, Missouri, with maps, sleeping bags, and hiking shoes, apparently planning to escape to Mexico. But they're carrying too much evidence with them, literally. On November 30th, they're arrested in a Missouri motel on fraud charges unrelated to Sydney's disappearance. The walls are closing in. The FBI launches a massive search operation. For 3 weeks, agents and local police scour the Nebraska countryside, following cell tower data, pursuing leads that go nowhere, racing against decomposition and weather. Then, on December 4th, an investigator notices something in a ditch beside a dirt road near Edgar. A human arm, partially visible through torn plastic. The tattoo is unmistakable. Everything will be wonderful someday. Over the next day, searchers find 12 more bags scattered across Clay County, each containing fragments of Sydney Loofe. The medical examiner determines cause of death is homicidal violence, including strangulation, with bruising that indicates Sydney fought desperately for her life. Trail and Bailey are extradited back to Nebraska and charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human remains. Trail's trial begins in June 2019 in Wilbur, and it immediately becomes a media circus. On the third day of proceedings, as prosecutors present damning evidence, Trail suddenly shouts, "Bailey is innocent, and I curse you all." Before anyone can react, he slashes his own throat with a razor blade, blood spraying across the courtroom. He survives, is hospitalized, and returns to court in a wheelchair. His attorneys argue for a mistrial, claiming the outburst prejudiced the jury. In July 2019, the jury convicts Aubrey Trail of first-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing in June 2021, Trail addresses the court one final time.
And Aubrey C. Trail, the defendant, do find the said defendant as to the charge of count 1, murder in the first degree, guilty of murder in the first degree.
Her story is a reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like a pretty girl on Tinder, a charming older man with money to spend. Sometimes evil wears a mask so convincing that by the time you see what's underneath, it's too late. Her story survives as a testament to a life cut short and a warning that the most dangerous monsters are the ones who know exactly how to make you believe they're not monsters at all.